Today, we are pleased to welcome our Operations Manager, Vicki Nutbrown, who recently shared travel advice and guidance for companies returning to travelling on business at a recent webinar organised by the Department for International Trade.
Operations managers within Good Travel, and I'm here today to give you an update on international travel and how much easier it seems to be becoming now countries are lifting their restrictions. So we have noticed within our client base that during the last 6 months, restrictions are getting much easier and more people are wishing to travel, and I think this has definitely helped with the opening of the borders from the US and Canada, which was quickly followed by the likes of Australia, New Zealand, India. So it definitely makes it much easier for you to travel to a lot more destinations. What I thought would be quite useful to do is give you a kind of breakdown of how easy it is to get to some places compared to others. So, Georgia, if you could just move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this first slide, it will just show you how easy it is to travel to certain destinations without any proof of vaccination. There's no health forms wishing to be completed. Most of those destinations are within Europe, but we've got Mexico on there. And this is kind of just a handful of options just to show you a quick reference guide, I suppose. If we move on to the next slide, please, Georgia. This one it's still easy, fairly easy to travel to these places as well, but it might mean that you have to complete any health forms and include any contact tracing apps. So if we look at the Netherlands, for example, here, all of these places, you do have to have proof of a negative of your vaccine certificate. But Netherlands, you have to also complete a COVID form just to say that you have had your vaccinations as well. Australia is quite a good one as well, that you don't have to have any PCR or antigen tests, which is quite handy. But you just have to complete forms just to say that you do have a vaccination, and similar with the US. There is a 1-day test to take before you enter the US, but it's just a couple of forms that you need to complete as well. So it's definitely becoming much easier. I've also got a note on there which Spain have recently changed their restrictions, meaning that if you haven't had your vaccinations, you can enter the country. You just have to have a PCR or antigen test. If we move on to the next one, this just shows you how very few countries are being very restricted. China, Taiwan and Hong Kong, it doesn't mean that you can't travel to these places. It just means that there are more restrictions in place. There's managed quarantine, which basically means for China that you have to quarantine for 14 days in a government approved hotel. So nobody in the world is kind of saying you can't travel. It's just that there's certain places that it's a little bit more difficult to travel to, but generally it's much easier, and definitely more than it was 6 or 7 months ago. A couple of things to bear in mind then. So it's been documented in the press about passport renewals taking a bit longer to process. This is probably a mix with Brexit, but also staff shortages and things, and more demand for the services. So again, it doesn't mean you're not going to get your passport in time. It just means you just have to be a little bit more organised and just prepare a little bit more. The same with visas. If you're traveling to a country which may require you to have a visa, like India, for example, then there is a little bit of a backlog in applications as well. So it's about taking that extra time to prepare for your trip well in advance. And I think that kind of mirrors through everything that I'm going to mention today. You can travel to a lot of places, but you just have to be extra organised and allow that a bit of extra planning and preparation ahead of your trip. If we move on to ground transportation, the thing that I think might be quite handy to point out here is about car rentals. So due to the pandemic, there is a reduction in the manufacturing of brand new cars. So this has impacted on the car rental industry. There's a lot of issues with last minute cancellations. So some of our clients, what we've experienced is they're preferring to book a transfer rather than a hire car. So they're still getting to the destination and having a car available for them, but it just means that it's a little bit easier for them to manage because it's more of a taxi chauffeur service for them. If we move on to the final slide, then this is kind of handy practical tips which may help you when you're with your planning and preparation. So I guess the key thing to do is, like I've mentioned, plan your trip much further in advance. As soon as you have your dates for your trip, it's probably good to start having a look at options. Or if you're booking through a TMC, a travel management company, then get them to start looking at options for you as well. Try to book as many of the elements of the trip as you can. So not just looking at booking your flights and hotel in advance, but looking at your transfers, adding any extra car parking, anything that you need to book your trip, then try to book as much in advance, and then it's less for you to worry about. Checking in online for flights. With low cost airlines, it's a mandatory requirement for most of these anyway, but even the mainstream airlines, try to get into the habit of checking in online. Some of the airlines are cancelling flights these days, so if you're checked in online, then you're less likely to be offloaded from a flight if a flight's overbooked, etc. And also make sure that your COVID paperwork is all completed in advance as well. This just helps you to get through the airport a little bit quicker. Any emergency contacts, so any email addresses and mobile phone numbers, it's always a good idea to have these added into your flight bookings. I'll go back to the flight cancellation thing. If an airline does cancel your flight, then if they have your information, it's very easy for them to get in touch with you. A lot of airlines will contact you prior to contacting the travel company as well, because you're their first priority. So it gives you more notice to kind of deal with the situation that's been put in front of you, and then just book onto a new flight if needs be. It's been documented in the press about the queues at the airports, and then as summertime approaches, we've just had the Maybank holiday, which caused extra traffic in the airports. So always try to allow extra time when you're checking in at the airports, just to get through security, etc. The airports do offer priority check-in and fast track security, but if these are in high demand, then they sometimes suspend the services, because otherwise they'd end up with a situation where everyone's got priority or fast track and then no one's in the general queues. So if you are looking to book these, try to book these in ahead of your travel. And then the final thing, I've touched upon this already, but the headlines in the newspapers are kind of mentioning a lot of negativity about the airports, the queues, etc. But the majority of flights, they are going on time. If airlines do need to cancel them, then they're trying to give as much notice to travellers as they can, so that it doesn't impact too much. And the airports, they are kind of trying to deal with any traffic issues as well. So, but it's always best to just allow as much time
If you'd like to find out more on your further
travel.
support, we have an excellent downloadable resource available on our website. Just go to www.good-travel.co.uk and head to the resources section.